Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Santa Clarita Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board of Directors for October 7th, 2024. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And if I would ask Director Hernandez if she would kindly stand and lead us in the pledge tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, Director Hernandez. And we can move on to our announcements for this afternoon's meeting. This meeting is being conducted in person at the SCV Water Agency E.G. Jerry Gladbach Water Treatment Plant boardroom. As a convenience to the public, members of the public may also participate virtually by logging into the agency Zoom meeting. Any member of the public may listen to the meeting or make comments to the board using the call-in number or Zoom webinar link. In the event there is a disruption of service which prevents the agency from broadcasting the meeting to members of the public using either the call-in option or internet-based service, this meeting will not be postponed or rescheduled, but will continue without remote participation. The remote participation option is being provided as a convenience to the public and is not required. Members of the public are welcome to attend the meeting in person. We do have members of the public present in the boardroom, so I'd like to remind those members and attendees that there are public comment cards in the lobby just outside of the boardroom. Please use those to help facilitate the public comment process. The procedure for today's meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each agenda item. Staff will present. I will ask for public comments. I will then ask for discussion and questions from board members. Once concluded, I will ask for a motion and a second. After any further discussion, the board secretary will call for the roll call votes. All board members are present today with the exception of Director Jason Gibbs, and we are honored to have Council Member Lorraine West attending as Jason's alternate. Oops. 2 pages this time. Okay. We now will continue the meeting per the agenda that you've all received. Item 1.3, public comments. Members of the public may comment as to items within subject matter jurisdiction of the agency that are not on the agenda at this time. We ask that members of the public wishing to comment on items that are listed on this agenda do so at the time each item is considered. I do not have any public comment cards for item 1.3, Madam Secretary. Do we have any members online, public members who wish to make public comment under item 1.3?
There's none.
Very good. We can move to item 1.4, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, additions, or modifications to the agenda from the board? Seeing none, the agenda is hereby approved. Please note there are additions of action items. They would be normally require a 2/3 vote. Oh, forget that. We didn't add anything, so we'll move right on to item 2, approval of the consent calendar. Before we ask for a motion and a vote on the consent calendar, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar? I have no public comment cards.
There's none online.
Very good. We have only one item on the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
This is Director Natoli, so moved.
Motion by Director Natoli. Second by Director Marks. Any discussion, questions? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Cooper,
Yes.
Director Goodside,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Marks,
Yes.
Director Natoli,
Aye.
Director West,
Aye.
and President Martin.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 2 has passed.
Very good. We can move to item 3.1, discussion and consideration of the Carson Curtis Ranch Storage LLC replacement well. And our presenter tonight, this afternoon rather, is Mr. Steve Cole.
Thank you, Chair Martin. You'll see there's kind of a round table of presenters tonight. Mr. Vergutz is at the Groundwater Resources Association conference. Building a deeper knowledge as always, which is a good thing for Rick and our team. But yeah, I have the pleasure of presenting this item today. The board will most likely recall at our last meeting, we had quite a discussion regarding a well application that had been submitted under the GSA's, what was relying upon at the time, the governor's order, drought order for reviewing well applications. Well, we've had an event since that last meeting in which the governor had issued a new executive order in which removed those authorities for GSAs to weigh in on well applications. Our recommendation, as you'll see it today, is brief in that we do not any longer as a GSA have the authority to weigh in on the well applications because the governor's order removed those authorities. So our recommendation to you all today is to essentially take no action on the well application that's before you. So with that, I'll close my brief presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Before we entertain questions from the board, do we have any public comment? Sorry about that. Before we entertain questions and discussion from the board, do we have any public comment? I have no public comment cards.
There is none online.
Very good.
I have a question. Thank you, Bill.
Director West.
Yes, I see that the governor has removed your right to actually, if I'm understanding correctly by what I just heard, your oversight really of monitoring groundwater water. So if I understand that correctly, what is the purpose of this board to engage now with the future of what happens to our river, our groundwater, and how that affects all the resources in this valley? What happens next? You just sit and take no action? Just approve things? Is that where we're going?
Mr. Cole, would you like to respond to that?
I think so.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a good one. I think what we've seen in the last couple legislative cycles is that there have been significant efforts to try and clean up some of the language of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I suspect that we will continue to see those. It was interesting in the governor's order, he did specifically in certain basins that have demonstrated overdraft. He left the authority in place for those basins to exercise that. I think for our sustainable agency, groundwater sustainability agency, there are other authorities given under the act that give the board a pathway to weigh in on the way that the wells are used. So this was just exclusively weighing in on the application process for a well. I think you'll see us look through those authorities and try and clarify those in our groundwater sustainability plan. I think there are inconsistencies in the way that Sigma lays those out. Staff has been working with legal counsel to try and understand those specifics. I think you are seeing in the state that some of those rules are getting challenged now in the courts, as many of these new legislative authorities do. So a little long-winded answer, I would say we have the authority to ensure that the groundwater basin is operated sustainably. So example, if this well were to come in and not be operated in a way that did that, this board would have the ability to weigh in on that. And Mr. Bunn, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else on kind of the legal authorities of things.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Sigma provides pretty broad powers to a groundwater sustainability agency, but what it doesn't provide is the sort of thing that would normally come in regulations. How do you exercise a power? And we don't really know. Do we have public hearings before assuming that power, or what do we do? And actually, I think that's the best way to do it if we were to regulate. But I think I'm going to take issue with Mr. Cole. I think one thing that it's unlikely, in my judgment, that we have under Sigma is the ability to choose how the water is used. And I base that basically on the fact that not only does it never mention that in Sigma or in the regulations, but California has never, almost never, taken an authority to say how the water should be used. As long as it's a reasonable and beneficial use, that's required by the Constitution, but that's the basic standard. And I very much doubt whether a court would hold that a groundwater sustainability agency had the ability to choose how the water is used, no matter what their reason for that.
Thank you, but I have more questions. So if you've ever woke up in the morning and your well's gone dry, you know the fear of having no water. And if you don't have a public line to your property with public agency water, and sometimes they go dry too. And I guess we're going to engage in seeing how that works with the governor's decision. But I would say this to you, the fear of losing control of the groundwater for you is probably great. But I would also say that you should have a greater fear of putting 250 million people in harm's way, because they're obviously not making good legislative decisions. And, you know, how to exercise your power. Well, I don't know what power you have, but we're soon going to find out because this will get tested. But the second thing is the city has done an extremely good job of preserving now close to 14,000 acres of land that will help recharge groundwater. And we depend on this agency to protect it. And when you say that you don't know how uses can be chosen or not chosen, well, a whole lot of states, 7 of them, in fact, have given up rights to the Colorado River because Colorado River is imperiled. And you're going to use less water. So groundwater does become more of an issue. But we all know what I'm talking about. And there are people that will overdraft the water, and by the time they've done it, it's too late. And that's why I mentioned when wells go dry, it's too late. And I believe that you have to work harder to find a way to empower your ability to protect the citizenry of this valley. And I don't see that in the verbiage I've just heard.
Mr. Chair.
Director Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have many of the same concerns that Director West does. And it terrifies me to hear that we've lost some control over what happens with this water. So I would like to know, perhaps at our next board meeting, could you come up with that list of authorities that we do have? Can we monitor? Can we require monitoring? What can we do to monitor the water that is being used? With whom can we require that monitoring? I don't know what all this executive order covers, but not being able to pre-review any of these well applications is a little scarier than it may seem on the surface. we may want to move forward with requiring monitoring sooner. And then what would our actions be if somebody is overdrafting or is putting the basin in peril? I'm thinking down in the Los Angeles area, I'm sorry, there go all the golf courses now. They're just going to be sinking wells and irrigating with local water instead of buying it from MWD. So that's it. I'd like to know what authorities we retain after the rescission of the oversight authority and what some of our options are. Thank you, Mr. President.
Director Cooper had a comment, but I would say that on the very next agenda item, we're going to talk about monitoring of private wells. So go ahead, Director Cooper.
Well, I must say I agree with Director Natoli and Alternate West. I would like to know what powers we have towards well operation. I think we're going to have some big issues in the future that we're going to need to take a look at. This well, in reading the report, is for a specific purpose to rehabitat the area along the river that has been disturbed by mining. And it's a very small well. It's 90 acre-feet a year. It's a smaller well than the one that was established there in the 1950s that has collapsed. So they're putting in a small well, and it says that its use, once things are established, will be, I think I think it gets shut off. And so it's going in for a specific purpose that we can monitor that that's the purpose that it continues to have. It's very small, I think, because it's going in under that. It's not just a well, it's a well that's going in for a specific purpose. And it's a purpose that is a part of our job, is maintaining habitat in the river. So this one isn't a problem, but I think we're going to have some in the future. I would like to see kind of what our authorities are for the future.
I can partially answer that tonight or this afternoon, and don't want to go into too much detail, but there is a provision in SGMA that allows the GSA to control groundwater extractions by regulating, limiting, or suspending extractions from individual groundwater wells or extractions from groundwater wells in the aggregate, construction of new groundwater wells, enlargement of existing groundwater wells, or reactivation of abandoned groundwater wells, or otherwise establishing groundwater extraction allocations. As you can see, that's quite broad. I have questions about how that is going to be applied, but you'll also see that that says nothing about the use of the groundwater. This is about the safety. I'd also point out, in case it wasn't clear, that this more recent executive order is just terminating the temporary order that was made during the drought. So we've just kind of gone back to where we were.
Director Goodside.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because that was my understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a consistency finding that this new well was consistent with the groundwater sustainability plan. And we previously were not doing that. When we were formed, we weren't doing that. So it wasn't one of our original things. It was an add-on. I would like to, hear, you mentioned what we can do. I do think we have a broad ability to monitor the valley, and we have currently no problems at all with our groundwater. So, I think long-term, and you mentioned implementation earlier, how do we implement things and under what situation do we implement them? Do we implement them before we have a problem, when we might have a problem? I would be cautious about picking and choosing winners if we don't have problems in our valley. So
I appreciate all the
Director
directors.
West.
I do. I appreciate all the directors' comments, and I think you need to bring back information. And I would appreciate what you're reading from and Sigma, the legal ease comments about what we can do and what we can't do. I'd like to read the law. So if you would send that to me, my email, I would appreciate it. But I would say to you, by the time you have figured out you have a problem, quite often it's a little late in the game, because when water's gone, it's just gone. And I think you've seen that. You're all very well informed on water, far more on the engineering than I would be. I've just experienced it, so I know it can be pretty devastating when it happens. So I think that the more you know about monitoring and what you can do in advance to prevent getting into a situation where it's already overdrafted is really important for the board to acknowledge. There are certain uses like the habitat restoration of a river. That's not a problem. That's certainly important. And you've just stated that that particular well would end its use with that. But for the river, the restoration is really important. I have no issue with doing those kind of things. I do have an issue with uses that will go on for 150 to 200 years that will just draft and overdraft, and you don't even know what the conditions are of the wells, where they go, how deep they are, and what they can produce, and what the strata is able to handle up front. Because if you don't have that information, it's pretty hard. Anyway, I hope you can come back with some good information that will assist everybody.
Very good. Director Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, kind of following along with this vein, I also want to mention that I know that later in our agenda, we're going to be talking about, the discussion on the proposed work plan. And I think that's really where what we're hearing, well, I'm hearing from the different directors, and that I'd like to make the connection to. So obviously we're going to be here looking at that. We have this opportunity where, we're focusing on 3 core tasks that we'll discuss later, and really understanding in relation to that plan what can be done. So I think that can be very applicable, right, to us as directors to say, okay, this is the plan that we've put forth, that we're looking towards. This is what's approved by the state. And then, relating the actions that we should take legally and can take legally in association with that plan. So for further discussion later in the agenda, maybe. Thank you.
Director Natoli.
I will defer to Director Marks right now.
I love the discussion that is occurring here, and very much look forward to your analysis, Mr. Bunn. Along with that, I think there's a comment about choosing winners and losers, but as I recall, there's a provision in Sigma that states that we're not in the position to dictate something that's going to result in a loss of a water right. So there's that balancing, and if you could include that aspect in your analysis when you bring that back to us, now that plays in.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Director
Mr.
Tolle.
President. Just 2 things. The basin may be operated sustainably now. It's important for us to make sure we always have the information that allows us to continue that sustainability, which to me means a lot more than just looking at a couple of monitoring wells. And then finally, there was a provision you read, Counselor, about we have the ability to stop construction. As a former zoning enforcement person and currently hearing officer, I can tell you we often don't know about those things until after the fact. So I certainly hope that we are strengthening our ties with public health, environmental health division, so we can be informed immediately when there are applications. And in fact, just to press that point, I may ask that at our board meetings, just a standing item is, we're informed on how many well applications have been received in the previous quarter and for what. So just a proposal, maybe something for us to think about. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very good. Director Gutzak.
Just one more quick thing, and I do agree this may be merging with the upcoming agenda item on working with private well owners, but one thing to consider long-term also is implementation. So I recall with this project, they said they were going to use it for habitat restoration. There's nothing binding making them use it for habitat restoration. So you can see how these things can get slippery very quickly. We can have applications where they say it's for some great purpose. If we don't have the authority or the ability or the staffing or frankly the money to follow up on what they're using it for in 20 years and there's no binding provisions, you know, I think maybe that's like we don't have regulatory authority. You know, how do we do that? Do we want to do that? It opens a whole can of worms to be looking at every single well application and making sure that they do what they say on the application. Do we even have that ability? I think it can get complex very quickly. And as we go forward with private well owners, you know, we need to consider what's the most efficient way to protect this valley's water resources without, you know, making a whole new bureaucracy of planning, checking, monitoring, or maybe we do that when we start to see problems or we think there's going to be problems. But I think this can get very complex very quickly, and I don't want to do too much if we don't understand, you know, how it's going to be implemented.
Very good. Yes, I agree with Director West's comments, and I agree absolutely that we need to remain vigilant about the condition of our local groundwater. And I think that, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cole and other staff members in the room, the GSP gives us, it is within our purview, I believe, to monitor groundwater to prevent, and we've called it undesirable effects. And there's quite a list of undesirable effects that goes under those headings. So I do think we have it within our responsibility to do exactly what Director West would like to see happen. Short of, like Director Cooper says, I'm not sure we can tell people how to use the water. But I do believe we can, it is within our responsibility to prevent undesirable effects through the vehicle of the GSA. And so I think we'd like to hear more. We've all said that. We'd like to hear more about what our options are going forward. And I know in the next agenda item, we're going to start talking about mandatory monitoring, voluntary monitoring between large producers and minimal producers. So I'd like to hear that discussion. I've read the staff report. I think there's a lot of things in that action that's coming that would help us to fulfill the need to monitor what's going on with groundwater in our agency. And so I do think it's within our responsibility, and I'd like to hear more about it going forward. So, but with that, we need to take an action on, like, we take no action. So
You
there's no.
take an action to take no action.
Take
I
an action,
recommend a
okay.
vote
So with
that you
that,
approve not to take an action, but
unless,
instead.
yes, unless
Okay.
there's no further, unless there's any further discussion, I would entertain a motion to take no action on the item that's described in 2.1, 3.1 rather.
Moved.
Seconded, good sight.
We had a motion, Director Goodside?
West moved.
Motion by
Goodside
Director
second.
West, second by Director Goodside. All right, unless there's further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on taking no action.
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Cooper,
Yes.
Director Goodside,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Marks,
Yes.
Director Natoli,
Aye.
Director West,
Aye.
President Martin.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 3.1 has passed.
Moving on.
All right, so now, since we've had somewhat of an introduction into item 3.2, this is going to be a discussion of proposed monitoring, reporting, and outreach initiatives for private well owners. Presenter tonight, welcome Rick Vasilopoulos to make our presentation tonight. I think you've got a helper on hand there.
I do.
It might be up there for a minute. All right, we'll go this way. Thank you, Director. And if anyone, I guess half of you probably know who I am, the other half don't. I'm Rick Vasilopoulos. I'm a water resources planner here at SCV Water. I'm helping Rick Vergoots out with some of these monitoring programs. And these monitoring programs that I'm going to discuss are basically a monitoring, reporting, and outreach initiatives for private well owners. All of these programs are required as part of the GSP implementation plan. Oh, it's not working.
Jonathan to the rescue.
It was working earlier. Oh, there we go. Well, it jumped, but that's fine. Here we go. There we go. So I'll start with a quick presentation outline. I'll first discuss the GSP implementation plans requirements. Then I'll introduce Tara, who will discuss some of our outreach plans. I'll then discuss the plans for our de minimis groundwater extraction program, and then move on to the domestic well quality monitoring program, and finally our recommendations. So staff will finalize an outreach plan with the help of CV Strategies to notify all pumpers that are required to report their extractions and enlist domestic groundwater users for water quality testing while promoting best management practices. Annual groundwater extractions. Extraction reporting from non-de minimis well owners for basin management purposes is necessary to measure the quantity of groundwater extractions that are occurring in the basin beyond that of municipal uses. Non-de minimis users not already reporting extractions have been identified and include agricultural wells, golf courses, and non-municipal pumpers. A metering or extraction reporting program will be implemented in accordance with the water code. The information collected will be used to account for pumping and to analyze projected basin conditions and to complete annual reports and our 5-year GSP assessment reports. Well owners are considered to be de minimis extractors when pumping over 2 acre-feet per year. So the GSP implementation plan also calls for 1 round of groundwater sampling for water quality at selected de minimis domestic wells in accordance with a domestic well monitoring plan, and to establish a baseline water quality for these groundwater users. Future monitoring will be evaluated after the baseline data is reviewed as part of this plan. Now, turn it over to Tara to start going over our outreach plan.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. It's good to be back, even though it's a completely new room. I don't even recognize anything anymore. I'm like, where am I? But my name is Tara Mullally, and I was helpful in capturing the community's input for the original groundwater sustainability plan. And I'm now attempting to continue that outreach because it's so important to our non-de minimis and de minimis well users so that we can secure the input that's absolutely necessary in order for us to make important decisions as we continue to move forward within the groundwater sustainability plan. So just as a reminder, I know this has already been gone over now a few times, but we love a little reminder here and there. The groundwater sustainability plan calls for a program requiring non-de minimis extractors to report annually using a water measuring method satisfactory to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, promoting best, and in addition to that, separately, promoting best practices, best management practices will include broad outreach to pumpers, in the basin and emphasize the importance of utilizing these best management practices and help pumpers understand the positive benefits that support sustainability. So there's two sort of engagement efforts. One is to, that was weird. Okay, this was like touching things and then that turned off. I don't know. Technology. So it's two very different objectives. One is to secure additional data to make decisions. Those are for our non-de-minimis, our big well pumpers. And then the other is to ensure that our smaller well pumpers are aware of what best management practices are and that using them will actually benefit not only them, but the entire region. Just reminding them, we count on you to be responsible too. So we're also above and beyond. So that's what the GSP mentions in it. But we're also reaching out to the smaller well pumpers to see about securing some of their data in order to, again, enhance what we're doing at the GSA and make sure that we're acting and we're making data-driven decisions moving forward. Which leads me to our overall goals. So for our large well users, we're going to propose standardized extraction measuring. We currently have 4 active well users, 5 Point, Golden Oak Ranch, Pitchess Detention Center, and Sand Canyon. And I believe there might be one more at some point. Was there like the 5th one that was kind of...
Yeah.
Yep.
The staff report says Curtis Sand and Gravel and Eternal Valley Cemetery.
There we go. So those are the 2 that are kind of, they're not our main 4, but they're definitely part of this consideration. And then our de minimis well users, so our smaller ones, we're looking to hopefully secure participation from 20 different well users across the area. So really trying to make sure that they're not all 20 right next to each other, but a broad range and array of data and information, and also educating them on the best management practices that we've included in the GSP. This requires a very simple, straightforward outreach approach. This doesn't need, because it's a small number of people that we're trying to really engage deeply, we need a handout identifying the need in the program. So that's where I get all of my talking points from, making sure that when I'm communicating clearly and what's been agreed to by staff, the board, and the GSP. Then we'll be building out a dedicated web page with all the information. So leveraging the handout, turning that into a dedicated web page. So that way information remains consistent and clear and concise. And then we'll also be mailing out the information to these de minimis well users, the de minimis well users. I just went backwards. Okay. In order to get, so those are the initial deliverables that we'll be creating. To leverage those deliverables, we'll be using existing connections to secure participation from non-de minimis well users. And we'll be people like Dennis Ostrom, who I know you guys maybe remember from the the advisory committee, will be reaching back out to those individuals to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and that we would love their continued participation. And then we'll be distributing the mailer, the initial list of all de minimis well users, and then I'll be connecting with them directly. There's really only about 90 different well users right now, so I'll be calling, it'll be the call tree, to see if they're willing to participate and to make sure that they understand what's in front of them and how it does not impact them. So my immediate next steps are to work with the team to craft the language, identifying the need, the process, and incentives, and then create a web page on the SCV-GSA website, develop the handouts. So now that we've agreed to all the messaging, develop those handouts, and then once we finally agree to all of those different components, actually connect and distribute the mailers. Again, I went back in time. And back to you.
So the next item we'll kind of go into is a little more detail in the non-de minimis extraction reporting program. As you can see here, a majority of the non-de minimis wells are located on the west side of the GSA's boundary. And to be consistent with the GSP's implementation guidelines, a well extraction reporting program for all wells using more than 2 acre-feet per year needs to be developed. Most of these non-de minimis well owners have already been inconsistently reporting usage, but standardizing this reporting will now need to be required on an annual basis to the GSA. Additionally, the owners will have to measure their usage with a water measuring methodology, which is satisfactory to the GSA. So staff has been in contact with most of these well owners during the GSP's development, but consistent data from the owners is important to understand the basin. The largest current owners are Five Point and Pitches Detention Center, whose active wells consist of about 95% of all non-de minimis owner extractions in the valley. Through the proposed outreach, we will engage these owners initially through an online meeting, as Tara mentioned, and through face-to-face meetings if necessary. We're going to be getting their input on the extraction reporting program and any challenges they may see in being able to adhere to these guidelines. So staff would like the board to discuss these initial approaches to the program. The first being the well registration form that can be found as an attachment to the board report that you have. We did use information from GSI, a technical report that they analyzed some other GSA's reporting procedures to prepare this document. We believe the document is easy enough for the well owners to fill out, yet still gives the GSA good amount of information about the wells for future analysis. Staff also proposes to give well owners 60 days to register their wells from the date the final form is released. Staff is also proposing that all private well owners be required to measure their extractions using a properly calibrated flow meter. There are a few owners who currently measure their usage by electrical means, which don't seem to be as accurate as a flow meter. Timing of these installations would be phased in and will be initially discussed with the well owners and finalized at a future board meeting. We do anticipate that all flow meters, once installed, will be required to be recalibrated at least every 3 years, or as the manufacturer of the meters require. So then all non-de minimis well owners will be required to report their extractions now on an annual basis per the GSP. The report we're assuming will be due by October 31st of each year. Staff is recommending that the report show water use for the months of April to September and a separate value for the months of October to May to correspond to the wet and dry seasons that we experience here in the valley. I'll now move into the second program that we're going to discuss, the de minimis voluntary water quality monitoring program. So staff will work again with CV Strategies to prepare an outreach material that will initially be sent out to approximately 90 or so potential private well owners located mainly in the canyon areas of the valley. We are hoping to receive 10 to 20 positive responses from this effort, and we'll then meet with these owners to discuss the program further, as well as distribute additional handouts and the confidential agreement that there is a draft copy of in your documents with the board report as well. This initial round of testing will be used as a baseline for water quality in the area. And it is anticipated that this testing will continue for at least the next 3 years. As for the program or goals of the program, staff will use the collected data in the GSA annual reports, but specific details of the actual ownership of the wells will not be used. The full test results will be shared with the owners as staff feels it is necessary to notify them of any abnormalities in their water quality. But the GSA is not responsible for notifying county health department or state of any individual results. SCV water staff will be used to collect the water samples and complete testing of the comprehensive panel of analytes as shown in this table. And finally, if it is found that there is no interest in participating in the program, the GSA will document this and include the findings in the annual reports and 5-year GSP update. But the GSA will then need to consider other options of obtaining water quality by possibly installing monitoring wells in the canyon areas. Our conclusions find that the proposed efforts will support GSP implementation and provide valuable information to evaluate groundwater use and quality in the basin. The program will repeat in future years as called for in the GSP. So that being said, staff recommend that the board discuss the initial approaches for the non-de minimis well owners described in this presentation, provide feedback to staff, and after that discussion, authorize staff to initiate the outreach and then return to the board with our final recommendations. We also ask that, say that staff recommend that the board discuss the initial approaches for the de minimis well owners project described in the presentation, provide feedback, and after that discussion, authorize staff to initiate the outreach and implement the program. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rick, for your presentation. Before we open it up to questions and discussion from the board, I have no public comment cards. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment online?
There is none online.
All right. Very good. Let's open it up to questions and discussions for Rick. Or he's asking for input. Now's the time. So, Director Gusite.
Thank you. I'll take it in two pieces since you asked for in two. So non-de minimis, the large water users. Are they getting the groundwater testing as well, or just the smaller pumpers?
Just the smaller, in these programs, it's just the smaller pumpers that are for testing for water quality.
Is there a reason we don't want to do the large ones, or a reason we're only looking at the small ones?
I believe that the larger ones may be testing their own water because they're using them for agricultural uses, where homeowners may not be testing theirs. Plus the areas that we're testing up in the valleys, we don't have a lot of information on, where we kind of have information on the water quality in the main area of the basin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
But it's not required, and it's not required in the GSP. We're basically doing the what's required in the GSP, and that was for the de minimis users to have water quality testing.
Oh, really? It specifically requires it for the small ones and not for the big ones. That's
Correct.
interesting.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then you mentioned you said they may be doing some reporting. Are they?
Yeah, so we've been just off the cuff asking them for their water use over the last couple of years since the GSP started, and to be able to prepare the GSP. I guess we had contacted them, but there's nothing formal. It's basically us just contacting them and asking them for the data.
Okay, so they're not obligated to show it to answer. Okay. So just a real quick then, some things I think may be useful information would be, staying on top of their flow meter calibrations, making sure that they do that. I mean, I would think the larger users probably have a program for that, but just, confirming that they're calibrated. Also confirming any changes. So, if they rehab a well, update it, change the pump, whatever, get that information. And then as I think Director Natoli said, notification of new installs in that category, working with the agency that's permitting any new wells, that we get notification so we can grasp them as they come online.
Yeah, part of the program will end up being any new non-de minimis users will have to also do this. We're working kind of looking at other agencies and seeing how they're doing it. Most of the other agencies are in ag areas, and the ag people know that they have to register their wells, where we don't have that program here. So
Right,
we do have to
right.
have, we'll have to have
Outreach.
something outreach on that as well.
Okay. And then just on the smaller users, the de minimis with the voluntary testing, I have concerns about quality of data. Small wells can be installed, any which way by any which way type of installer. They can have localized contamination. I just think we have to handle it carefully. If we're testing the wells that we're not liable for it, we're doing full QA/QC. We might want to think about if we want to offer them a split sample. I just don't want to see huge alarm when there's a problem in a certain canyon because somebody 100 years ago had an underground waste oil tank and
Right.
nobody else
Knows
knows.
how-
Or the well casing's falling apart and nobody wants to admit that.
Sure.
So I think that needs to be handled carefully. I think it's good information, but there needs to be, clear lines of what we're going to do with it, what we're going to assume from it. Not, oh my God, we've got contamination here. We must do something about it. That it may not be our jurisdiction. We might need to tell someone else, but or not. I don't know.
We're not required.
But yeah,
Mr.
what?
Bunn mentioned that we're not. to me, that
But
we're
what do
not
we
required,
do
but
if
what
we
do?
have?
Right.
What do we do if somebody has benzene in their well? We're a public agency. Then we have public information of benzene in a well. I think that that's something we need to consider as we start accumulating data. Is what if it's something we don't like? Then what do we do?
Right.
So that's
For
all.
sure. Okay. Thank you.
Director West.
I think Director Gusite raises some really good points. I know I stopped using my well on the ranch 40 years ago because the testing was required and you just couldn't be sure whether the water was going to meet health reasons. And even if you don't care, if you're drinking it, you should note that it can do serious damage. And small people are going to be tested and the large ones aren't. Well, is Eternal Valley using the water? It's now brown. I don't know if you've noticed, but Eternal Valley is now brown because they didn't have water to water with. Are they drinking that there? Do they have public water or are they just using well water? And Sand Canyon Golf Course, all the wells went down in Sand Canyon. Sand Canyon didn't have enough water to water the golf course, and so half of it died. Is their water being used for all the public that goes there for major events? See, I don't know the answer to these questions, but you can find out. But I think it's a good question because things do show up and wells all the time, and it changes from time to time, depending, like Director Gusai says, all of a sudden the water hits something that was not disclosed or known about, is covered up, and then it comes to light that it's in the water. And then my last thing is, you're all very concerned about PFAS and you're using very expensive wells to get rid of it because it's really not healthy for us, our pets, or anything else. So is that being tested and is that okay for people to just drink that out of their water well? I mean, these are all questions, public health, we have a responsibility to keep people healthy, whether they want to be kept healthy or not. It's really our responsibility because there are children growing up and they don't know how to read those tests and it's up to their parents. And it all comes down to costing money for testing and doing it once right. So I think, these are questions we need to have answered and we can't just look the other way and say, well, we don't know that it's there. Well, if it is there and you know about it, what are you going to do about it? Because if you don't do something, you're public officials who took an oath. You need to do something. We need to ask those questions. And if the state legislature does not understand what they're doing, which in most cases lately, they don't seem to, you need to raise the questions. Because it's our responsibility. It's our community. It's here first.
Okay. Director Hernandez, do you have a question?
I do. I have several, but I'll try not to bombard you. And I know probably other directors have some questions. Just to kind of follow up on some of these questions, and just for clarity, my understanding is that the laboratory here will be conducting the testing for the de minimis water quality
That is our
samples.
plans as of
Yes,
now, yes.
and that you will be testing for PFAS. That's what the staff report.
Yes.
Okay, so there's some good information there for everybody. I think I want to go back to kind of to frame the two asks that you
Mhm.
have of us today, right? You have a recommendation associated with non-de minimis pumpers, right? And I wanted to understand a little bit better. In the staff report, we're talking about timing, and that is that following the finalization of the well registration form, that there's within 60 days or 60 days of installing a new well, that's when you'll begin this process. So I'm wondering, how much engagement have you made with those non-de minimis pumpers? Number one. Number two, are they aware that it's coming? Do you anticipate significant cost or other flow meters to be added to them? Those are a whole round robin of questions.
Sure.
I'll let you answer those first and
Okay.
then I'll follow
Yeah,
up.
I would say a majority of them know that this is coming down the pipe. That this is the biggest issue, I believe, with most of them is the flow meter issue, because that will be, there will be a cost associated with that. And that's why we're going to meet with them and see what that cost would be. And we don't anticipate having the GSA have any, spend any of the GSA's money to help them implement that, but that, I guess, could be a possibility if it is exorbitant. But those are some of the things that we want to meet with them directly as part of the outreach program to see what they think about that. The largest pumper, the 5 Point development, knows that they're probably going to be required to put their flow meters on, because they're the biggest one that uses the electrical metering right now. So they do know. And one thing that I guess we haven't figured out is like the wells that we're going to have them report on, are they wells that are going to be taken offline through other means, or the reasons why they're going to be able to build out west here. If those wells will be taken off, if we still have to test them, if they're not going to be tested, if they're going to just be destroyed, all that kind of thing will have to be hashed out as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's helpful. I think, regarding timing, you're not asking us to determine the appropriate timing from the registration form being completed, because you're still having ongoing talks with these non-de minimis pumpers. Is that correct?
Correct. So they'll all have to register. We're assuming 60 days is plenty of time for them to register their well, whether it has a flow meter, whether it doesn't have a flow meter.
Upon notification.
Upon notification that the
Okay.
program is up and running. After that, that's where we have to talk to them each individually about how long it's going to take them. They're not just going to snap their fingers and have their flow meters installed. It's just not going to. It's impossible for them to do that, or it's not going to be cost effective for them. So our first reporting, if we were able to get this up and running, our first reporting would be in October of next year. We would hope that ones that only have one or two owners that only have one or two wells that need their flow meters, that we could get them to install, but the ones that have 10, 20, 30 meters that are flow meters that need to be installed, we're planning on giving them time and kind of having them roll in, even though their wells will still take their information. It's just, it won't be, we'll still take their records from their electronic monitoring. We just won't have everybody up and running in the flow meters for a few years, probably.
I gotcha. And so has there been consideration given as to flow meters and the amount of flow meters if there is close proximity between the wells? So for example, like one of these that is mentioned here is Peter Pitches, and I know that they have a cluster of wells. So are you making a recommendation to this board regarding when they're in some kind of proximity that, for example, one or two may be sufficient in terms of flow meters, or are you looking at that at all?
Sure. Yeah, we haven't discussed that obviously with them yet, but as Pitches as an example, they have five, I believe they have five wells up there, three of which they don't seem to use. Their reporting that they've given us over the last 3 or 4 years is minimal, if not any. So they would technically only have 2 meters that they would have to put on if they were using, I honestly don't know if they're using flow meters already or if they report electronically. But they seem to only have 2 meters that use the majority of their water.
Yeah, so I would say that those are considerations that we love to hear back
Mhm.
upon, like once you've had those discussions, so that you can understand, from and I see what you're saying. You need to understand from the de minimis pumpers, what their need is, what their time frame is, what that cost is going to be. So do you anticipate being in front of this board the next quarter or in 6 months, or what is your thinking that we would hear back from their responses?
I think we were hoping to have contact at least with everybody before the next board meeting.
Okay.
If not, it would be the one after. It would be the one after that. I think these are every quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And-
Well,
Well, there's not as many, so the 90's tough. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
gonna be a little more, I think that will be a bigger challenge to get the de minimis well people on board. Where, these larger pumpers probably already have to report their usage to the state or to the,
right.
somebody other than us now requiring it as well.
So
So they're used to it.
that's a great segue towards if, in fact, the directors are interested in water quality data in addition to the de minimis pumpers that we are looking at, we can get that. I mean, I think that staff could probably get that for us and report it it is public record for those non-de minimis pumpers that they have to report, certain water quality parameters. So we can learn from them what that water quality is around the basin if that's something that this board so desires. I'm going to move now and I'm going to try to wrap it up, everybody. I'm going to move on now to the de minimis pumpers. And I just, I think my fellow directors made a really good point. And what I tend to hear is that there is a real reluctancy for, small well owners to want to disclose, not just what they're pumping, but what that water quality is. And so I wonder what kind of approach, and one, have you already felt that in your initial engagement with them? Because I do think it's something real that, oftentimes they're worried about, who's looking at that data, what regulation is going to be brought upon them, what is going to be done if they have, let's say a PFAS, a high PFAS, and not even high, but above the maximum threshold, right? And so, can you share a little bit more about what you already know about those de minimis users?
Well, probably know about as much as we do. Yes, we haven't contacted them, any of them yet. That's where we wanted to see if that was a direction that the board wanted to go, but we assume just in general, people don't want to give any government agency any information if they don't have to. So we believe that we will get pushback on that front. But we believe all we can do, I mean, it is a requirement for us to at least put our best foot forward and trying to get people on board to be able to do this program. And if not, that's where it comes to where we may, if we do need that data up in the canyon areas, which is kind of the area that we don't have that data from, that we may need to look at putting our own monitoring wells to monitor the water quality up there.
And can you share with me the analytes that were chosen? Was that through communication with the state?
It's pretty much the same that we at SCV Water test for. So there wasn't any rhyme or reason. It was basically just taking the majority of the analytes that are tested through our regular water here, and just using that same. One of the reasons being that we know that our testing can be done on the water and get those results. Okay.
So on these, let's say that we get the desirable 20. Do you know what kind of cost that would be?
We haven't looked at it since we are using SCV Waters. We would be using SCV Waters Testing Center and also or our lab and our operations department to collect the samples. It's once a year. If there's 20 people, and it's just, we're not testing the water down in the well. They're basically gonna be turning on a spigot next to the wells and taking the water samples and taking them back to the lab. So figure a half hour, let's say an hour at every place, 20, it's 200 or 20 hours. Let's say 50 hours. It's one guy for a week. So it's not exorbitant.
Thank you for your answers and your patience. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Okay, very good. Now, is that question, Director Cooper?
Thank you. Some very good questions, Director Hernandez. I appreciate those. There's some other ones. Did Hart High School ever get off of the well that they're on? I know that they were going to, and I think they do the park there as well, it's watered, so that's a large
They're-
well.
They're no longer using the well. It's my understanding the well still exists.
But it's not used.
Correct.
And then the mutual water companies that are out there, those would be large users as well.
Yeah, most of the mutuals locally here are on public water, but they have private water systems. So there's a couple of examples of some smaller ones, like the mobile home park, for instance, up off of Bouquet area.
Yeah.
Ms. Cattell reminded me of Lark Ranch, right? There's a few others that
Yes.
come to mind that we may have to add on to the list. Most of those are, in the case of like Lark Ranch, my understanding their well's no longer operational either. But we'll have to do a little bit deeper dive on some of those.
And can't we, the wells that we're putting, we're going to require metering. Can't we put our electronic metering on those? Instead of having to make the homeowners do their self-reporting, can't we just have our own electronic metering system that we already have placed on those?
I don't know if that's possible.
And you could do that with the the small users as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure those meters are compatible with wells. I don't know for sure.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. It could take quite a bit of effort to get telemetry to equip production wells. We do it with ours, but some of these others, it would be another layer of complexity. But it's something worth exploring with some of the. I think larger users more than the de minimis ones. You'd have to get electrical. You'd have to get, there's a whole sequence of events there that you would probably have to have.
Well, ours are battery powered, so yeah, as long as it's within
Yeah.
distance of
Different
receiver.
technology though.
Yes.
Domestic versus kind of a production well.
Yeah, the small users, they did this in Colorado a number of years ago, and there's thousands of farms, and they made everybody from cabins to farms. Anybody that had a well had to report, and boy, people were not happy, and did not go over well. Finally, it came down to a requirement that they had to do it, and they all had to do it. And then they read their meter once a year and send it in on a postcard, and it's no big deal. But I'd like to know too, what are our obligations when you do find wells out there that say are contaminated? Is you, of course, notify the well owner and the homeowner out there. They may not have access to our water. What's our obligation at that point? Is it just a matter of notification? They live up a canyon, they're in is it just to notify them that they have this problem? Or are we going to have some obligation in this? Well, I'd like to find out at some point. That's it.
Director Natoli?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things. First, I am aware that Curtis Sand and Gravel no longer owns that property, and it's owned by a company called Land Veritas. So just for updating the records. And then on the well registration form, just a couple of things. Under the additional well information, I'm an APN nerd. Um, The format in LA County is 4 numbers, 3 numbers, 3 numbers. Not 3 numbers, 3 numbers, 3 numbers. So on the form, just add another dash on that first section. And with the well location address, I'm wondering if it says provide accurate sketch. I like asking for GPS coordinates. Could we get GPS coordinates?
I think, is that one of the, I thought that was one of the line items for their their.
I don't see it.
Okay,
Of course, that doesn't
may have
mean
left
it's
it up.
not
That was
there.
one of the, yeah, we can definitely ask for their coordinates of theirs to do it. I thought we had that in there, but I could be wrong.
Thank you. And then on the right of entry and license agreement, the draft agreement you have in here for the de minimis users. I'm wondering, Counselor Bunn, about this, the first paragraph, the right of entry and license agreement, blah, blah, blah. Between the licensor and the Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency as licensee. We're the Santa Clarita Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And this is an agreement with the Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency. Do we, as a GSA, have some sort of an agreement with Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency to have them do this work for the GSA?
Well, yes, all the technical work for the GSA is done by the water agency.
And I can't remember if that's in the JPA.
I believe it is.
If we could just confirm it's in the JPA. I didn't. get
And
a
the ones
chance.
who are actually going on the property will be employees of the agency.
I understand that, but they're not, SCV-WA is not the SCV-GSA. So I just want to make sure, sorry, I just want to make sure we have that connection established somewhere. I'm just thinking of legal implications. Some poor inspector goes out there and falls. I know the agreement says property owner is not responsible if they haven't done anything wrong, but I'm just wondering about that connection with the GSA.
Right. We'll
All right.
take a look.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very good. Director Marks.
Couple quick questions. Rick. There were some comments made about using some of our equipment to measure flows and de minimis well users. I didn't think we were collecting flow data. I thought it was just water quality. Could you clarify?
Yeah, for the de minimis, it's only water quality. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, it's just the non de minimis ones that we're taking their extractions.
And to echo some of the other directors' concerns about having a clear path forward as to what we do when or if we do find water that's exceeding drinking water quality standards, particularly how legal counsel's analysis of somebody going to come up with some potentially unique theory that somehow we're doing or our actions are resulting in a diminishment of their property value and somehow we become liable for that.
Just another hurdle. Yeah, I'm sure.
Another comment?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Probably a step farther than I was thinking about people just freaking out when they get the result. But yeah, I mean, if they're, all of a sudden now responsible for some site cleanup that they weren't responsible for before, are we all, what's our obligation? How do we handle that? So that would be a good question to get answered. Also, just on the mention that the large pumpers are probably already doing water quality data. I would think that that would be valuable to have, especially in terms of PFAS, which we know is extremely low regulatory levels. And if we're irrigating golf courses with, PFAS water, that could be a problem and also maybe an opportunity for a package treatment plant in that area to help out. So I really like the idea of getting water quality data from large users, especially if they're already doing it, or if not, can we include them? To Director Cooper's comment, yeah, maybe if not our radio read meters, but data loggers or something else. I would be concerned about mistakes on reporting. Or, I saw the thing for the photo, that's good, but well, meters can turn over, meters can be changed in the middle of a year. If there's some kind of electronic collection that would make it easier for them and more reliable for us. And then also just the last comment on I'm sorry, I wish we could call them large pumpers and small pumpers, but we're not. The small pumpers, when you said that we would sample at a spigot, that reminded me of the issues with internal plumbing and potential problems with the plumbing. I see we're not sampling for metals, but I think we should have maybe some thought on where to pull a sample, because that could be pretty varied if you are pulling from the wellhead for some people and from a spigot for somebody else.
Yeah, we're hoping, when I said spigot, I meant a spigot near the well itself.
Yeah.
Most of them have like a back that does something where they can take the sample right
Yeah.
from the well.
Okay, not going to their
We're not
hose
going to their
bib.
hose bib. or
Okay,
their huts in the
thank
night.
you. Yes, thank you. That's all.
Very good.
We don't want to go in their houses.
That
That's
doesn't,
another level of.
it doesn't leave much for me to ask, of all the questions that have been raised, but I did have a question about, in one of your slides, you indicated usage measuring. Is that simply quantity,
Yes,
not what they're using it for?
not what they're using
Okay.
it. Correct.
They don't have to, even voluntarily.
I mean, we
they don't
kind
have
of
to
know
report.
what
Okay.
they're using it
Okay,
for,
so
just in general.
the large producers are mandated to do this, correct, under GSA?
Yes.
And so we are looking for volunteers, and 10 to 20, I guess, is what you're looking for originally. Are we providing any incentive other than this just would be helpful for you to do this and take on this additional cost and additional inconvenience to report to us?
That was one of the things we had talked about. We weren't exactly sure what we can and can't do as to help them, I don't know how much money you can give them or how many gift cards you can give them. Or we did think that you would think if you have not tested your water quality over any length of time, that would be a benefit, that you would get your water quality. But yeah, that might not be enough to get people to.
Well, are we doing the water quality testing for the de minimis users at our expense or their expense?
That would be at our expense. At least that's the plan.
Okay.
It's our expense.
Good. But not for the non-de minimis users.
Correct. That will probably get a little.
As I
pricey.
recall, PFAS testing out on the open market is pretty expensive.
Yes.
So, all right. Pardon? Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. So I started thinking a little bit more about this hesitance from the de minimis users. Can you share with us what your reporting requirement is, and maybe follow me along here? Is it possible to not use owner name in the reporting outside? In other words, what was reported publicly? Is there a way not to disclose the APN and the well owner's name?
For sure. Yeah, no, none of
Okay.
that information would be, so this information would basically be in bulk in our reports, in our annual report and in the 5-year review of the GSP. None of that data would be in those documents. So we would have it internally, but it would not be broadcast to anybody else.
Okay, so it's just a collective, and that's something that you're articulating to.
That will be one
to
of the
them.
big
Okay.
things, because if you tell people that you're going to put that in a report, you're not going to get anybody to.
Got
Oh,
it.
that,
Okay,
that
thanks.
too.
I mean,
Would that be considered a public record, council?
Yes,
Okay.
but the likelihood that somebody's going to be coming in and asking for all those may not be very high.
Okay, one more item. I do have public comment requests from Sandra Cattell. Once upon a time, we took public comments after the board had their discussion, so I don't think anything wrong with it. Mr. Cattell has gone to the trouble to come. Would you want to ask your question or make your comment now? Well, only if you want people to hear you.
Well, thank you for allowing me this exception here. I had a couple of comments and a question. The first comment is, we all know that the people who have wells out here are a very fiercely independent bunch of people. And if you come to them and say, we're going to test your well and we're going to potentially eventually quantify how much water you're using, all I can say is I wish you a lot of luck coming up with 20 people. Also, I live in Placerita Canyon, and there is one user that I don't think was mentioned. I don't know if they're a de minimis user or a large user or a medium user, and that would be the oil fields. And I know they use water. I don't know if they use SCV water or if they use well water, but they do use it. They have steam injection to separate the oil. It's very heavy oil, which is then the wastewater is injected back into the ground. I know they use a cornucopia of chemicals, including hydrofluoric and hydrochloric acids. And I would recommend, as Rick had mentioned, that there's a possibility of going and perhaps doing a community testing well. I would recommend, if you really want to know what's going on in a place like Placerita Canyon, downstream of the oil wells, that you actually do some testing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, for your comment. Did you want to respond?
No, that's a good idea.
Okay.
I think especially if we don't get any other participation, there's, that is something we're gonna have to look into, for sure.
Right.
Just one follow-up comment
That's
to what,
that's golden.
just one follow-up comment to what Ms. Cattell said. I worked for almost 20 years in a adjudicated basin area. There are no well owners who want to report what they're doing. And they don't, it's not uncommon for water agency people going out and checking on wells to be threatened and with bodily harm. Let's put it that way. I won't say what means, but we understand. Well owners want to stay private, so
We're
anyway.
hoping water quality is
Yeah.
something that they would really like to know. Now, if they're not using it for drinking or they're not using it for their animals and they're just putting it on their crops or they're washing down areas, then maybe they don't care as much. But anyone that's possibly drinking their water or using it for their animals, you would think they'd want to know what's in the water. But you're right,
It doesn't matter whether it's just water quality. When the government people come to check on my well, they don't like it. So,
I have one.
Director West.
Yeah, you have in your presentation on computer screen, you have Curtis Steele, and it's Curtis Salmon.
landing grab.
That it's not Curtis Steele. That never existed. So just for clarification, I want to make sure we have that.
Okay. So you were looking for input. Now, Tara, you go way back when we were just putting this thing together, long before the merger even happened. So, and now you're.
To join the committee, so we're gonna just be charming and. go
Yes, she
along
said she could do it.
So you knew we were going to get to this point. Yes, yes, of course. Took a while.
Not shot at, but maybe yelled at.
So Rick, did you get the input that you're looking for from the board?
I think as long as you're comfortable with us kind of going through what we had talked about and, contacting everyone, starting to put together the flyers and the material for these people and stuff. I think that's where we wanted to go next. And then bring it back, and what our findings are, once we dig our feet a little bit more into it.
Okay. This is not an action item. We're not looking for action. As long as you've gotten input and questions and comments from the board,
Yeah.
we're good on that, right?
Good.
Okay. Well, then I think that completes item 3.2.
Thank you.
We can move to item 3.3, discussion of proposed work plan to respond to Department of Water Resources recommended corrective actions on the approved SCV-GSA groundwater sustainability plan. All right.
Thanks, President.
Al Hassan, our
Thanks,
Chief of
President
our Water
Martin.
Resources Department, is our presenter.
Thanks, President Martin. I'm Ali Al Hassan. I'm the Director of Water Resources. I'm sitting here today for Rick. He is up in Lake Tahoe doing a presentation for the Groundwater Resources Association of California. And so I'm trying to cover for some of the activities that you have been leading over the last couple of months. The main activity that you have been leading here is in June of this year, we came to present to the board about the activities and the plans for the approaches that we're putting together for addressing the corrective action recommendations that we received from the Department of Water Resources. We wanted to have more details, but before getting into that, putting more of the details, we wanted to make sure that we have the same understanding with the Department of Water Resources. So in August of this year, end of August of this year, Rick and staff went up to Sacramento and had a meeting, a very fruitful meeting with the Department of Water Resources staff who are responsible for review of the groundwater sustainability plans. The meeting was described as a very fruitful. We received very good feedback. We confirmed our understanding of what they are asking for in the recommendation letter. And we get some specifics about addressing some of the issues that we didn't have a good understanding of what they mean in the letter, specifically the water quality, what they mean when they are saying that we want you to have those minimum thresholds. And our staff presented to them the uniqueness of our valley and the issues that we have with the pollution that existing in the valley and how that need to be addressed. And they received some very constructive feedback from the Department of Water Resources. And now they understand clearly what's happening in our basin that's different than other basins with regard to water quality. And the struggle that we had when developing the groundwater sustainability plan on specifically having minimum thresholds, while there is other regulatory agencies who are determining some of these these minimum thresholds for contaminants, especially Department of Toxic Substance Control and others. And so the other issue that they spoke about in that meeting is the interconnection with surface water. And at that time, the Department of Water Resources are still working on their guidelines that came out, I think, a week after that meeting. And now our staff are reviewing those guidelines. And the feedback we received in that meeting, it's very helpful. It's the way we are addressing the interconnection right now using the groundwater model. And when we explained that to them, became very satisfactory to DWR, but definitely we wanted to make sure that it will meet the guidelines that they put out and how we can make our work aligned with what they are asking us for. So overall, the experience have helped us significantly in clearly coming back with a clear idea of what we wanted to do for the next steps of how to address the groundwater sustainability plan update and how this activities that we're going to carry out in the next couple of years will lead us to the updated plan that's due date to the Department of Water Resources is January 1st, end of January of 2027. So I have one slide for this presentation. I'm trying to reduce the amount of slides. And in this slide, I'm I'm going to take you through the three main tasks that we have identified or staff have identified that will be carried out in the next couple of years so that it can help with the update of the groundwater sustainability plan. The first, and then these again, all these are part of the recommendations from the Department of Water Resources. The first task is the update of the hydrogeologic conceptual model, the HCM, and assess land subsidence potential. This is the first task that we're going to start with because we think that this task is going to be essential for any other activities that we're going to do into the future. And it's a very important task that we plan to carry out in the starting the next month. This task actually stemmed out of the DWR recommending addressing data gaps and uncertainty in the existing hydrogeologic conceptual model. And so what we are trying to do, what we are planning to do, what are some of the details for that task now is we are going to obtain and analyze additional geologic data. We agreed with that with the Department of Water Resources. This will include some geophysical logs from oil development and Department of Transportation. And these are information that we didn't include in the original groundwater sustainability plan that became available to us now. So we are trying to include all of this information. We're going to hire someone who help us to collect and analyze all of this information in the next 6 months. But also we are planning to do some field geophysical data collection in some of the areas that of interest for us, especially some of the GDE areas, because we have some issues with understanding of the hydrogeology into these areas. And this became very clear for us when we did the piezometers in GDEB. For us, we knew just from drilling that piezometers there and drilling the new well that the thickness of the alluvial aquifer is not 126 feet, it's only 25 feet under GDEB. And so those new information is going to help us to refine our understanding of what's in the aquifer, refine our understanding in some of the specific important areas in the aquifer. And that's the importance of the updating the hydrogeologic conceptual model. It's also helping us in defining where we have clay layers in the basin, and that's important for the subsidence. That's one of the requirements from the Department of Water Resources, where we need to have more identification of where are the clay zones in the aquifer and the aquifer thickness. They wanted us to include that information. And again, as I mentioned, this task is very important for shaping task 2 and task 3. The picture in front of you is just showing you the different activities in the timeline until 2027. And the colors are just what we are planning to do in each one of the fiscal years, starting July of this year. This is our 2025 fiscal year, which goes until June of next year, June 2025, and so on. So the green is where we are going to focus mainly on the update of the hydrogeologic conceptual model. In the next couple of months, we are planning to hire a consultant to help us with that. And that will be one of the activities that we are going to report about in the next GSA meeting. Moving forward, we are to carry out task 2 and task 3, and those are going to happen simultaneously. We are seeing them here as separate, but those are going to be carried out at the same time. And those are refinement of our sustainable management criteria and sustainable yield, and also carry out public outreach. In our meeting with the Department of Water Resources, they advised us to have outreach activities, but they didn't identify for us, is it going to be at the same level of the original GSP, or it's a light outreach activities. And that's one of the things that we're going to go back again to the Department of Water Resources just to clarify that activity. But one of the things that, again, in those carrying out those tasks in the next 2 years simultaneously, We're going to update the sustainable management criteria that we have for the basin. That's looking into degradation of water quality, lowering of groundwater levels, depletion of interconnected surface water, and then refine on or reevaluate our sustainable yield. But at the same time, we're going to carry out outreach activities. We are planning, and we have it in our plans to carry out activities. Right now, we are planning to continue updating the GSA website, update the interested parties list of stakeholders, and also carry out public workshops. At this point, staff are thinking of 3 main public workshops so that we can educate stakeholders about the different developments explain to them the DWR requirements and also explain how we are responding to the DWR requirements, and also present to them the information that we got at the end of the information that we gather, how we can better define the undesirable conditions. All of these activities will definitely require us to update our horse work, the groundwater model, the workhorse that we have, and the groundwater model update is going to be a big task that we're going to carry out starting very soon. We're starting improving our understanding of the data, and we are acquiring more new data as we are installing some observation wells. So all, updating the sustainable management criteria and updating the hydrogeologic conceptual model will help us into develop better minimum thresholds. As you remember, in developing the groundwater sustainability plans, we have to develop minimum thresholds. So now we are gonna reevaluate the existing minimum thresholds and also improve them and reevaluate them. Also, we have to look into, again, the groundwater budgets that resulting from all of these activities, and also looking into future groundwater pumping plans. And that's anticipated outcomes of all of these activities. At this point, we don't anticipate increase in the budget, but if you observe in the staff report that you received, we moved a little bit. We adjusted the budget categories, and we moved some money ahead because we wanted to carry some of the activities that will require us to hire a consultant and do some work now. And so we just moved the funding around in the table that you see in the staff report, but we didn't increase the overall budget for this year. With that, Mr. President, I'm finished with my presentation. I will take any questions.
Thank you, Ali, for your presentation. I have no public comment cards. Do we have any public comment online?
There is none.
So then it's open to Board Director Cooper.
Just a quick one, Ollie. In task 2.3, you have in March, May, public workshop for refinement of SMC for interconnected surface water groundwater. We're looking at what the effect of the groundwater table is on the ecosystem. Is that what we're doing in there? We're not looking at potentially groundwater under the influence of surface water at that point, are we?
No, we're looking into the impact of lowering groundwater.
Okay.
We wanted to determine what's the chronic lower
Okay.
lower water level that will happen in the aquifer.
Good. I'm glad we're not going the other way. Good. Thank you.
Dr. Marks.
Thanks for the report, Ali. Just for clarification, groundwater dependent ecosystem area B, that's at the I-5, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. I was glad to hear that you were able to get in and talk to DWR staff. I'd like to get a little bit more information about what they had to say, particularly with groundwater. The comments that we received seem to direct us to develop extraction levels that would result in undesirable results, which, for a variety of reasons, don't make a lot of sense. Were they, or did they find our previous approach acceptable now, or are they looking for something else?
So Director Marks, if you can clarify to me, you mean for the groundwater quality?
Yes.
Okay. So they understand the dilemma that we have. That they didn't like our approach. So, but they understand that we have a different situation than what they have seen. One of the advices that they provided to us is to divide the basin into zones, into groundwater quality zones. And the area with the pollutants could be considered as a special area different than the rest of the basin. And so they provided some ideas of how to do. I would ask Rick Vergoods to provide that information because I didn't attend the meeting. Rick is the one who attended the meeting. And they provided specific approaches that my understanding from Rick is still might not work for us 100%, but at least they are open to provide some ideas for us. And one of the ideas is dividing the aquifer into zones where we have a special zone, which is the pollution, where we have the pollution. And in that area, they are open for taking into consideration what other regulatory agencies are mandating in those areas. So that's my understanding talking to Rick.
Okay. Would be interested in following up with you on
Sure.
on that in more detail. And then, because I highly encourage staff to review the documents on interconnected surface water very carefully. Those documents which they're soliciting comments on, an initial reading of them talks about quantifying depletion of surface water by groundwater, and they seem to be encouraging agencies to go back to a development scenario where there were no groundwater extractions, and how that gets squared with the provisions of Sigma that talk about not having conditions that existed in 2015 be further degraded. I'm not sure what the nexus is there. So, and I also understand that there is a document that's being prepared by DWR that talks about, well, now that you know what the surface water depletion is, taking the next step to how you come up with a minimum threshold and so forth. So I think it would be helpful for this board to hear back from staff on what these new guidelines say and what the implications are for basing it. I read them once and it was concerning.
Sure. Staff are reviewing it right now, and we'll bring it back to the board in the next meeting to
Thank you.
present it.
Director Guzzo.
Thank you. I also appreciate you going up to Sacramento, and I appreciate our other directors that are heavily involved for all these decades in water quality, because certainly SCV Water has the capability to respond to all of this. It has become much more complex and costly than we originally thought. Still channeling former Director Mortensen, who was saying it's only going to be this much and it's only going to be for 5 years. Well, neither of those were true. But we are lucky to be at an agency that we're at. I cannot imagine other areas doing that. And I know you can't say, but I mean, what is Copperopolis and Porterville and Tulare doing? I highly doubt they're doing hydrogeologic conceptual models in Copperopolis, California. It's just a little stunning to me. I mean, what we can do, and is everybody doing this? And for the areas that the state didn't like their plan and took over, I can't imagine the state paying for all of this for all of the state. It's kind of a little bizarre. I think it's fabulous information. That information about the depth of that aquifer at that point is amazing to me, to hear it that thin. And we certainly can learn more about our water system here, manage it better. But I don't know. To hear Director Mark's concern about policies potentially having negative impacts, I wish there was a way that we can provide some feedback that, this was not what it was sold, that there's unintentional consequences. Maybe we're going beyond regulatory intent. I just don't think because we're a bigger agency with more technical skills that we should be asked to do more. And if everybody else is having to do this, heaven help them in the small communities in California. It's a bit bizarre to me. I'm glad we're in a place that can do it, but I don't think everybody's doing that, and I don't think that that's right. That's all.
Director Hernandez, did you want to speak? Director Rest?
No,
Director Hernandez.
I agree with Maria that there's some complicated issues here that we can deal with, but we're not even sure we can deal with it yet. So we'll see.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, I think Director Marks mentioned some of the things that I'm also concerned with. I think I would like to understand more, maybe again, this is one of this, can you share more about the conversation? I don't know that you can at this point, but, specifically, there was reference in the staff report that, there was this evaluation for subsidence. And so, here we go again, back to the things that can be done here in, updating, the sustainable management criteria and reevaluating the sustainable yield. And then, really look there, DWR is saying they're going to come out with some guidance on subsidence, and then they did. So I'm wondering how that guidance, and at the time when you were in Sacramento, it wasn't available to you, right? But then shortly thereafter, it became available. So how is that new guidance going to impact task 3? And do you anticipate significant change after making that review? Because we're talking about tackling task 3, in a year, and then, making those refinements shortly thereafter, and it could be pretty substantial.
Thank you for the question. When we finalized this task, details of these tasks, actually, after we hear from the DWR, we met with them personally in August. We came back in September and we received the news about that there is new guidelines for both the surface water interconnection, depletion of the and surface water interconnection, and as well as the subsidence guidance. And we plan to include those guidance into our activities. As you mentioned, we still have a year to incorporate everything. But right now, what we are focusing on, which is really task one, which is the hydrogeologic conceptual model. That's going to be the basic step that we'll need to take so that we can improve our understanding, especially in places where we can anticipate some of these issues near the river, places where we understand there is some issues with water quality. And I think one of the things that we started already monitoring for subsidence in the basin. That's part of the implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan. So our information, I think, is going to highlight for us: do we see any issues in our basin for subsidence? I think sometimes the DWR staff, when they put some of these, they put it general request for everyone because they're dealing with big issues of subsidence in the Central Valley, which is totally different than what we are dealing with here. And so when we went to DWR in Sacramento, our main purpose was to explain more to them about our specific basin, our specific issues, so that they can understand that some of these issues that they generally talk about, it's not applicable for us here. And I think my understanding, and Sarfraz was one of our senior hydrogeologists, was one of in the meeting. And my understanding, talking to both Rick and Sarfraz and our consultant who went with them, is that DWR have a good understanding of what we do in our basin. They have a better understanding of what we do in our basin here, and they see that there is some difference in some of these issues. But to answer your question, yeah, we are reviewing all of these new guidelines, and we are incorporating them into our update for the next time for the update of the GSP.
Thank you. So as a follow-up question, and I wonder if this, may address Director Mark's, request, is that it sounds like there was some success. And so do you feel that upon completion of task one, that there is some buy-in associated with our model and some confidence from DWR's perspective? And that maybe after the completion of task one, you'll be better positioned to share some of the things that's being asked regarding how they feel about water quality and those kinds of things?
Sure. One of the plans and this is something I think maybe we need to share with the group here. As part of this activity of reaching out to the DWR, we hired a consultant who used to work for the DWR and reviewing the GSBs. So one of our consultants is used to work for the Department of Water Resources. He was the lead person for reviewing the GSPs. So we hired him to help us facilitate the communication with the DWR. He helped us in putting together this task activities so that we can address, again, to the satisfaction of DWR. Part of his participation or part of his facilitation is having some frequent meetings with DWR. So when we finish task one, we'll go back again to DWR, tell them, this is what we did for task one, answering your question here. Is that satisfactory for you, so that we can move to task two and task three? And so that's our plan. That's what we hired the consultant for, to help us with that. And that's how we are going to approach it.
Thank you so much for that answer, because I think that gives us a little bit more confidence. I was thinking the same thing. When are we going back and making sure DWR? I don't want to get to, 2027 just to hear, no, we want something else, right? Or it's not quite there yet. So I think that insight that you just shared is very helpful. And I think that's all for my questions right now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Any more from this side? Okay. Director Marks.
Well, one follow-up. Did the discussion with DWR get into the criteria that we're using for avoiding undesirable results on the environmental resources in the river.
Director Musk, I need to check with Mr. Vergoots and get back to you.
Okay.
Okay. I have a bit of a, I guess I wouldn't call it a bit of a problem, but a bit of a problem. The characterization of corrective actions. We have an approved GSP, correct? But they want more, or they want refinement. Do you agree with the characterization of corrective action?
We internally, we try to think about it as recommendations. The term corrective actions is used globally for everyone in submitting a groundwater sustainability plan. And so for some of these agencies who need to do a review of the whole plan and providing it back again to DWR, they term them corrective action. For us, it's more like a recommendation of, yes, truly we have an approved plan, but there is some gaps that we need to fill. And they wanted to see us taking steps into filling some of these gaps.
Okay. Yes, I mean, we understand that DWR is going through this for the first time, like all of the GSAs.
That's true.
And right now, I know that Dirk, I attend and you attend some of these implementation subcommittee meetings, and the focus has been on the GSAs that have unapproved or rejected or need more information, or really the focus is there. But I sense, and maybe I'm imagining, but the mood of some of the attendees at that meeting is that there's moving of the goalposts, there's moving targets, and they're asking for more and more and more. Now, some of that, I guess, is understandable, but in the same sense that Director West says we need to be vigilant about new wells or well operations in our valley, we need to be vigilant about Department of Water Resourcing overreaching in their requirements, that such that this is going to be a continuing moving target and we're never going to be quite finished. So that's one of my concerns. And like the old saying, better is the enemy of good enough. But I appreciate that we do have an approved plan, and I appreciate that you're able to move some of these activities around such that we can work within the budget that we already have. I appreciate that. But I would, when we say we're going to have another outreach and a workshop on chronic lowering of groundwater levels, this tells me that perhaps they're looking for us to lower them or to raise them, to raise the levels. So let's hope that we have a reasonable outcome of that effort so that we can continue to use the valuable resource that we have as we are taking care of it. So anyway, any more from this side? Any more from this side? Thank you very much. Informational presentation. I appreciate it, Ali. And we can move on to the next item, which would be the quarterly status, item 3.4, quarterly status update of the groundwater sustainability plan. Very timely.
Thank you, President Martin. And again, it will be myself presenting on behalf of Rick. This is a regular update that Rick used to do every meeting to help the GSA board members understand what we have been doing in the past 3 months since the last meeting that we met in person. Next slide, please. So the update today, probably we have a couple of the updates already done. The well permits, we talked a little bit about that issue at the first item that we discussed today. And then the non-de minimis and de minimis wells outreach, that was the second update. Usually we come and talk about them, but now we have an item today in our agenda talking about that. And the third one is the plan for the groundwater sustainability plan 5-year review. And I just addressed that in my previous presentation. So what's left from this list that you usually come and give updates about is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Round 2 Implementation Grant. This is the funding that we received from the Department of Water from the state so that we can install monitoring wells in the aquifer for SOGAS monitoring mainly. And that's funding received in the last fiscal year. And then we talk a little bit about the groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring that we have been carrying out as part of the implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan. Next slide, please. So the grant, as we mentioned, we received funding to install monitoring wells in the basin. Some of the activities I think Rick mentioned previously to the board is we have been working with our engineering department in a well siting study that we have been doing with the help of the engineering team. And that study have resulted in identification of locations, potential locations for these wells. One of the things that we are struggling, and this is kind of Rick is always thinking 4 or 5 years ahead of some of the issues might rise. The process, the grant process with the DWR took longer, and that encroached into the time for the grant implementation. And so right now we were thinking we're having still 3 years since the start of them signing. It took them for a long time to sign the agreement and send it back to us so that we can use it and start doing the work. And so for that, we're thinking that yes, we will be able to install wells, but probably we're not going to be able to install all of them unless they give us extension. And one of the issues we approached them already about it is the possibility for extension. We're dealing with new staff in the DWR, not the staff that who approved for us the agreement. And so we have to go through a new learning process with the staff in the DWR, and hopefully we're going to get the extension so that we can install all the wells and use all the money. But right now, that's one of the issues we are thinking with regard to the grant administration. The well installation, as I mentioned, we already started siting, designing, construction of those wells in those locations with the help of our engineering department. As of now, we are conducting environmental reviews of the sites. For each one of those sites that we identified 15 locations around the basin to install the wells. That's the plan, is to install 15 wells. We're going through the process to understand any CEQA-related constraints in those sites. And one of the things that most recently, I think Rick Pergut, Rick Vasilopoulos, and our engineering team working on is to find the intent here to find well construction areas that will be exempt from CEQA. So that's one of the things that how we can make that work. And we are working with consultants to help us through that. And so there is a potential for us to reduce the timing for that we're going to spend in the environmental review of those sites if we start finding some of these sites that will be able to be exempt from the CEQA. We continue, also part of this grant is to continue look at well records in our basin, and this is in relation to the two work that Rick Vasilopoulos gave a presentation today about. We're looking at the records from the county and from any other places about how many wells we have in the basin, and that's something that we wanted to document. We want to identify if we have any records of these wells and locations, if we can find those. And that would be helpful also for us for when we go out to the de minimis and non-de minimis to reach out to them. That will help guide the outreach. So those are some of the activities that we continue working with regard to the SGM round 2. Next slide, please, Uni. With regard to the groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring, field work completed in September. So we want to acknowledge the cooperation and collaboration with 5 Points where they allowed us to use their land to do some of these activities. And in collaboration with them, they allowed us to, they gave us permission to get into their land, do these activities. And now we are compiling all of this information, doing the analysis of the information, and probably we're going to present it in the next report in the next quarter. The field work included reviewing vegetation condition and also documenting surface water presence absence. The river, as you know, have been shifting locations many times over the last couple of years, due last year to flooding and all of those information. So we wanted to compare where is the location of the river for those monitoring locations in comparison to last year and the year before when we started. And also as we talked a little bit in the past board meeting about the upland groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring. This work is going to be done in October of this year. So this month we're going to do the last survey that we're going to do. This is the last funded survey that we're going to do for the upland groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring. And that's, I think, the main things for the presentation. I think there is one slide. This is the last slide for me. Other implementation efforts that we have been doing, we have been upgrading our data management system. That's required by to be as part of the groundwater sustainability plan. And what we are trying to do with that, the intention here is to be able to accept data automatically and generate reports automatically. So our staff don't need to go again and do this manually every year. We wanted to create a system that will take the data automatically when they collect data from the different sources, and then generate the report that we need to submit for the board for approval, as well as for DWR. All the data that need to be reported to the DWR, we wanted to create that automatically, electronically, so that we can submit it easily. And then lastly, the first run of land surface elevation monitoring, which is part of the land subsidence effort, have been done. And I don't remember, I think that was done 6 months ago. We are doing second round this month, and that's going to be twice every year. We're going to continue doing this activity where we go out and monitor for land surface elevation differences. With that, I end my presentation and have any questions.
Thank you, Ali. Once again, no public comment cards. Uni, we have any public comment online?
There is none.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Dr. El Hassan? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the update, Ali. To move to item 4, SCV-GSA Executive Director update, and that report, that would be Mr. Cole.
Thank you, President Martin. I'll be brief. We appreciate the feedback today. I think it'll be helpful as we design our programs and move forward with our outreach. It's always nice to hear from the board and understand kind of the perspective that you have on what are challenging subjects as we design and continue to work on our GSP refinement here in the Valley. Just one item as far as the water quality approach that Ali mentioned earlier. We do have staff and a consultant that are going to be presenting at the Aqua Groundwater Committee. So if anybody's participating in those, I know a few of you do, you'll hear about those challenges, about kind of the one shoe does not fit all approach. You've got basins like ours that have a mix. You've got other basins that may just have naturally occurring water quality challenges, and then everything in between. And it's really difficult to design a program or approach that's going to work for all. So I think those that you can participate in that will get some good information. So that's all I had. Thank you.
And I think one of those is a subcommittee meeting coming up this Thursday, not groundwater committee.
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
It's groundwater quality and Sigma
Subcommittee.
implementation jointly, and that's Thursday afternoon.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Bud.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Are there any public comments online, Uni?
There is none.
Very good. Any questions or comments for Mr. Cole? Director West?
Not real relevant to us getting approved by the state for every action, and we keep getting pushback. But at some point, the sanitation district has done an incredible job of complying with regional water, and the water that we're putting in the river is very, very good water. And it is beyond my comprehension to understand why we can't get the use of recycled water. I think it'd be very beneficial to the agency. It would make a lot of relief on different uses that are not where you're drinking, but you're playing on it or you're using it agriculturally. It's good water, and I think that, you have to keep pushing that button because we will hit a wall at some point, no matter what you do. And there's brilliant efforts going on here and good ideas, but at some point you're pushed into situations with what the state's allowing in development everywhere that cannot be accommodated. When they decided that every single home could become anywhere from a 3 to an 8 unit apartment building on every single parcel in the state of California. And that's what they did. They threw CEQA out the window, and the requirements for water and even sewage was not addressed, are tremendous. So you got to look at recycled water, and I hope that you will keep that in your focus.
One additional item, President Martin, thank you for that, Director West. Mr. Bunn needs to walk through some Form 700 reporting requirements for the directors. So if you got a moment, we'll do that now.
Can I ask a quick question on the subcommittee? Can you send a link? And if, are they live? Like, can we watch that? Okay, can you send us all a link? Yeah, thank you.
Subcommittee where they're talking about.
Did you want to comment, Tom? No? Okay. All right.
So
Any other comments? Go ahead.
on Form 700, I wanted to report on SB 1156, which was signed by the governor a week or two ago. It requires groundwater sustainability agency directors and the executive director to file Form 700. This form is a statement of your economic interests. Many of you, if not all of you, already filed this form for your principal agency. But now this will be a second one that you can file. You can file them together as part of one form. But there are a few differences with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. First of all, you'll need it, at least initially, to fall in the broadest category, which means full disclosure of all your economic assets of every kind. This will be the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is a multi-county agency. So if you're not doing that already, you'll have to check the little box for that. And all your financial disclosures are financial interests that you have within the boundary of whatever it is. So if you'll have to do it not only for the area of your principal agency, but also the area of the GSA. I'm assuming here that you must file an assuming office statement, which is due January 31st. For your principal agency, that's your annual report is not due until later. So if you want to file them together, you want to do that by January 1st. You don't have to file them together, by the way. Especially if the interests that you're disclosing for some purposes are different, but you can do that. And to end on a happy note, not filing this when you have to is a crime.
Happy note.
Any questions there? Sir?
Does that go for alternate directors as well?
Yes.
Everybody.
And can you repeat that again? I was
The whole
listening
thing?
to, no, just the initial form. I don't believe that I filed the initial form upon joining. I did. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I appreciate that. Okay,
She keeps us straight.
thank you. So the second filing, you're saying the recommendation would be that be filed in January?
That would be for the assume, since you didn't have to file it for this agency before. I believe that the FPP, and this just happened, this governor's signature, so we may get further guidance from the FPPC. But you have to file an assuming office statement within 30 days after you take an office. And this law that the governor just signed will take in effect on January 1. So within 30 days of that is the assuming office statement that you must file. After that, the other ones will be the annual reports, and they'll all be due in early April. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that brings us to director requests for future agenda items. And I'd like to offer Director West the opportunity to, what you said earlier about what you'd like to see come before the board. If you want to reword that or word it originally as in a future agenda item?
Yes, well, I think I was pretty clear on what I wanted to see come to the board. So don't make me go back through that whole diatribe again. But I am asking for it to come to the board, and we obviously are going on a path that's extraordinarily new in the state of California. And we don't have a lot of the problems that other areas have, but we certainly, we need to know the impacts of what everybody's doing to groundwater and the levels. I don't want to see us have subsidence like whole houses falling into holes in Texas and Florida. And I don't think we're going to get there because you've been very diligent in working. But I do think that you are going to have a lot of resistance to the agency really looking at what's going on. Unfortunately, if you don't, there's other consequences. So maybe there is a carrot to go along with this. I mean, maybe there's something we can offer the first 10 or 20 to join in, become part of the water club, save yourself, know what's going on, sort of thing. But I have grave concern about users overpumping, not wanting to report because they haven't had to in the past. And that's fine, but the world just changed. I mean, at the city, we now feel like we're on a 3D chessboard, and every time we turn around, there's, 5 to 15 new pieces of legislation that have to be intertwined into everything we do. And you're getting the same thing. So all of that we can have come forward and get more information will help everybody in the board make good decisions to help direct staff.
Okay. And I take it it's given that it's within the purview of our agency and our board to the limitations of the Groundwater Sustainability Act. All right. All right. Any other requests for future agenda items? All right, seeing none, then we're at item 6. Adjournment. Before I adjourn the board meeting, I would like to say that the next SCV-GSA regular board meeting is scheduled for January 6th, 2025. And I hope we're all back. All right, we are hereby adjourned.